A man walks into the most sacred place in his world. He doesn't pray. He doesn't kneel. He grabs a table with both hands and flips it. Coins scatter across stone. Doves burst into the sky. And the people who run that place, the ones who profit from every pilgrim's pocket, stand frozen. Not because they fear him, because they know he's right. But to get why that moment matters, you need to know something most people miss. The man who did this, Jesus of Nazareth, talked about money more than he talked about heaven. More than prayer, more than faith itself. And the way he talked about it was far stranger, more layered, and more modern than you've been told. You're standing in a market square in 1st century Judea. Dust coats your sandals. The air smells of sweat and grain and animal dung. Around you, people haggle over bread, cloth, oil. They pay with small silver coins, each one about the size of your thumbnail. That coin has a name. It's called a denarius, and it buys you one thing above all else: a single day of labor. One coin, one day. That's the math of survival here. Every person in this crowd knows these prices the way you know the cost of gas. They live and die by them. Now imagine a teacher steps onto a low stone wall at the edge of this square. He starts telling stories, not grand myths, not prophecy. He talks about a boss who pays every worker the same wage, no matter when they showed up. He talks about a woman who tears her house apart, searching for one lost coin. He talks about a man who buries money in the ground instead of using it, and gets punished. These aren't random tales. They're built on the currency in your pocket, the bread on your table, the rent you owe. What's strange is how many of these stories he told. Of the short tales he shared across his teaching life, nearly half center on money. Fields treated as assets, seeds as investments, servants held to account for returns. This wasn't a teacher who drifted into finance now and then. He built his entire way of teaching around it. He used the marketplace to explain the sacred. And that choice was not an accident. But here's where it gets tricky. Ask most people what Jesus thought about wealth, and you'll get a clean answer. He said it was bad. Or maybe, and he said, give it all away. See, the truth is far more messy. His teachings on money break into 3 groups, and only one of them is negative. In most passages, he speaks of wealth in a way that's neutral or even warm. A worker deserves fair wages. A wise manager grows what he's been given. A father splits his fortune between 2 sons, and the act of giving is framed as generous, not foolish. Then, in a smaller but fierce set of passages, the tone shifts dark. Greed corrodes. Hoarding blinds. A rich man feasts while a beggar dies at his gate. But then there's a third group, a handful that refuse to land on either side. A tax collector named Zacchaeus gives away half of what he owns. Is that enough? Too much. The text doesn't say, it just hangs there, daring you to decide. So which is it? Is money a gift or a trap? He seems to say both. And he seems to say it on purpose. Think of it this way. You hold a kitchen knife. You can slice bread with it. You can also hurt someone. The knife doesn't change. Your grip does. Your aim does. Your heart does. That's what these teachings circle around. Not the coin, but the hand that holds it. Not the wealth, but the want behind it. And that's what most people get wrong about the famous phrase. You've heard it. Money is the root of all evil. But that's a misquote. The actual line, and it comes from Paul, not Jesus, says the love of money is the root, the desire, the obsession, the loyalty. Jesus made that same point in a single sharp sentence. You can't serve 2 masters. You'll cling to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and wealth. He didn't say wealth was poison. He said it was a rival. But what does that look like in practice? Not in theory. In the dirt, in the crowd, in the temple. You're back in the temple now. This isn't a quiet chapel. It's a vast complex of courts and covered walkways. And inside those walkways, men sit behind wooden tables. They're money changers. Every pilgrim who comes to offer a sacrifice has to swap their Roman coins for temple currency. And for every swap, these men skim a fee. It sounds small, But when thousands of pilgrims pass through every week, that fee builds a fortune. Meanwhile, the poorest travelers, the ones who can't afford a lamb, buy doves instead. Cages of them, stacked and waiting, priced far above what any fair market would charge. This is what Jesus walks into, and this is what he destroys. He doesn't give a speech first. He acts. Tables go over, coins ring on stone, cages break open and birds fill the air. He calls the place a den of thieves, not because trade itself is wrong, but because this trade preys on the faithful. It turns worship into profit, the sacred into a markup. Here's what's easy to miss. He didn't target the priests. He didn't attack the theology. He went straight for the cash registers. His problem wasn't religion. It was the business model behind it. And something changed after he did it. Recent work on site layers from that era suggests a gap, a stretch where no money-changing booths appear in the record. Whether that means the changers fled, regrouped, or were forced out, the disruption was real. It left a mark in the ground itself. Now, you might hear all of this and think, fine, he was against corruption. But did he offer anything better? Did he have a plan? His first followers thought so. Within weeks of his death, a community formed in the city. The book of Acts describes thousands of people pooling their resources into a shared fund. Not under force, not by decree, they chose it. And most of what they gathered flowed out, to widows, to orphans, to anyone in need. This wasn't charity in the way we think of it. It was restructuring. They didn't just give leftovers. They dissolved the gap between rich and poor at the table. But there's a limit to this story that deserves honesty. This model was local. It happened in one city, among one group, in one moment of intense belief. Later letters from the same tradition describe people owning homes, running businesses, employing workers. The shared chest didn't become a lasting system. It was a flash, bright, radical, and brief. Does that make it meaningless? Or does it make it more interesting? A community that chose, even for a short time, to act as if no one's hunger mattered less than anyone else's. That's not an economic program. It's a mirror. And it asks a question that hasn't aged. What would you share if you believed you were part of one body? There's a common objection worth facing here. Some scholars argue that all of this, the parables, the coins, the temple scene, is spiritual metaphor, that Jesus never meant to address real economics. He was talking about the soul, not the market. And there's truth in that. He never drafted policy. He never named a tax rate or proposed a trade law. But this reading has a blind spot. If the money language is only metaphor, why is it so precise? Why use specific coins? Why reference daily wages that match historical records? Why physically destroy a working marketplace? Metaphors don't usually leave a gap in the ground. His audience didn't hear poetry. They heard a man talking about their rent, their debt, their survival, and telling them that how they handled those things revealed something about their deepest loyalties. Here's a detail that changes the scale of these stories. One of his most famous parables uses a unit of currency so large it's hard to grasp. A talent wasn't a coin you carried in your pocket. It was a massive lump of silver worth more than a decade of labor. And in the story, a master hands out several of these to his servants. He's not giving pocket change. He's handing over lifetimes. The stakes in this parable aren't about smart investing. They're about what you do when someone trusts you with more than you can carry. The servant who buries his talent in the ground gets condemned. Not for losing it, for doing nothing with it. The sin isn't failure, it's paralysis. Fear dressed up as caution. And that line still cuts, because most people who hoard don't think of themselves as afraid. They think of themselves as careful. There's another story, smaller, quieter, but in some ways more radical. A widow drops 2 tiny bronze coins into the temple offering box. Each one is worth almost nothing. But Jesus stops. He points her out to his followers. He says she gave more than the rich donors who poured in gold. Because they gave from their surplus, she gave from her need. He doesn't measure the gift by its weight. He measures it by what it costs the giver. This is the part that breaks the usual debate wide open. It's not about rich versus poor. It's not about how much you have. It's about the distance between what you hold and what you release. Generosity, in this frame, is not an amount. It's a ratio. And Jesus picks the widow. One more thread worth pulling. Luke's gospel is the only one that tells the story of a woman tearing her house apart to find one lost coin. Recent study of ancient financial records from a community in Egypt shows that women handled a large share of local giving. This wasn't unusual. Women managed households. They controlled budgets. They decided what went to the temple and what stayed in the jar. By centering a woman in a money parable, the text reflects a reality that later tradition tried to erase. Women were economic actors, and Jesus built a teaching around one of them. So what do you do with all of this? A teacher who talked about money more than heaven, who used coins and wages and market deals to teach about the soul, who flipped tables in a temple because profit had swallowed prayer, who inspired a community to share everything, briefly, imperfectly, but completely. If any of this shifted how you think about faith, money, or both, there's more where this came from. Subscribe, because the next story goes even deeper. And somewhere, that widow's 2 coins are still falling. They never hit the bottom of the box. They're still teaching us what it costs to give everything.